Hello, everyone, and welcome to Choose FI. Today, a little bit of a different type of episode. We're trying a little bit of an experiment here where it's an interactive show, and we are doing this for the next several weeks using an app called Stereo. For more information or to join us on the next live event, you can just go to choosefi.com/live. It is going to be taking place Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And again, if you would like to join us and participate in these live events, just go to choosefi.com/live. And the reason is that this is the ultimate crowdsourced personal finance show. Welcome to Choose FI.
You're listening to Choose FI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. Choose FI, your home for financial independence online.
All right, guys, diving into it, we're running our first trial of this 10-week series, and tonight's episode, and maybe what we'll kind of come back to a couple times, is what's stopping you from reaching financial independence. And for people, longtime listeners of this show, you know that financial independence is this idea that you can get to the point where working is optional. But I thought maybe before we do this live event and we take some of these questions, we just start by kind of breaking that down a little bit further. And to help me with this, I have my co-host Brad here with me today. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Jonathan, I am doing quite well. Yeah, this should be a lot of fun. We've always wanted to do kind of like a live radio show. So this is a neat way to be able to do this. We talked about it, as you said, as this crowdsourced personal finance show. So we have people listen live and they get to send in their little voice messages. We get to riff off them. So this is really about just having the community be involved. And the side benefit is then we're recording this also for the Friday roundup. So yeah, it looks like the next 10 of these Friday roundups we're going to do with these live events. So I'm excited, a little bit nervous, but mostly excited here.
All right, with that, this is our first live event, and I suspect there will be just a couple car crashes involved. So I hope you enjoy it as a full and very entertaining event. Let's go ahead and kick this thing off. Huge shout out to everybody that has joined us here. I know there's 35 of you on right now. This is our first live event that we've done. The goal was, would it be possible for us to recreate kind of a radio show on demand, one that we could, I don't want to set up a phone number that you could call in. I kind of like the whole podcast feel, but is there a way that you could, interact with us, submit your voicemails? And in fact, the context for today's conversation is, what's stopping you? What's stopping you from reaching financial independence? Maybe you found our show within the last couple of years. Maybe you've been with us since the beginning, and you keep waiting for that episode. That one episode's going to have that piece of information that you've been looking for, and we just have not delivered. And so you keep waiting. And I was like, that can't be the most efficient way to go about doing this. What if we could just make it interactive? So just join us on the show. And either if you're prompted with a question because you feel like we missed something on our Monday interview, or maybe you've just been looking around for an answer, just join us on our interactive live and ask your question. Let's figure out what is it that's stopping you from reaching financial independence. All right. So let's dial this up a notch. What is financial independence? Now, those of you that are coming and following us from our podcast, I know you know this, but let's assume that maybe swiped right, swiped left, stumbled on the show, and you got that question as well. What would it look like to just simply get to the point where working is optional, right? Get to the point where if you choose to work, it's not because you're doing it out of fear on how you're going to pay the bills or reaching some corporation's goals. It's based on your own goals, your own drive. It's not to say that you walk away and you drink pina coladas and you never do anything else again, but you recognize that time is your most precious non-renewable resource, and you want to prioritize your life around that reality. So we do have someone waiting to talk, and we're going to start doing voicemails. There's a voicemail feature where you can just submit any questions that you have about that concept, that idea. You can drop a question related to that. Okay, well, with that in mind, we'll go ahead and we'll go a little bit farther with this conversation. What is stopping you from reaching financial independence? And maybe more importantly for new people, what is financial independence? And how do you reach it? All right. So Lorena has a question here. Right. She's got $6,000 in savings and she's just trying to figure out how to allocate that. And Brad, I think if we were to dive into that, she wants to know, should I invest 50% in M1 and VTI or VTSAX? Just kind of wondering what allocation there. And I think Brad, both of us would take the position as, obviously it depends. I know throwaway, right? But like, what are your goals and what is your timeline? The thing about the financial independence community is we don't typically think about, all right, hey, you're approaching 65 or hey, you're 21. It's more like, what is your general timeline and what is the time at which you're going to need this money or anticipate needing this money? And that would really drive a lot of the conversation as it would come to allocation.
Yeah, I think, like you said, a lot of this is going to come down to where you are, what your exact situation is, your comfort level, right? It sounds, Lorena, like you are comfortable. You've got this money saved up. You're ready to invest. You probably have listened to our podcast. You, I'm sure, have listened to other shows and have a sense of, okay, clearly I'm saving money, right? I can move forward. I'm not paycheck to paycheck. Things are good. I'm saving for the long term. I think that's the real important aspect of this. And I think most of us don't know a lot about investing and we think about it as a short-term game. And I think that is the fundamental misunderstanding of what we're doing here. We are playing long-term games. That's pretty much what we in the FI community are doing. We're playing long-term games every time we can. So if this is money that you feel comfortable investing, hopefully for 10, 20, 30 plus years, and you're not going to freak out when the market inevitably and invariably has a correction, goes down 10%, goes down 20%, like that is going to happen sometime, multiple times in the next 1, 3, 5, 10, 20 years. It's just going to happen. But we genuinely believe, based on past performance and where we've seen the US and world economies go, that over the long term, this is going to give us the highest likelihood of success. That's how I look at investing in a total stock market index fund or some similar index fund. So I think of it as a long-term game. And I'm comfortable putting that money in week after week, month after month, year after year. But the real important caveat, and this is where you have to know yourself, if this is really critical money to you that you want to just put away, like you need to have some type of emergency fund for yourself. Hey, to sleep well at night, I need to have $5,000 saved away and just in a savings account, nothing's going to happen to it. All right, then maybe you only consider putting that next 1,000. You said you had 6,000 total into the stock market. And then as you continue savings, then you put that additional money in, right? So Jonathan, that's kind of how I conceptualize it. It's like, it really is going to depend on her personal situation.
Right. So the question is, where do I put this money, and what should my allocation be? So the M1 platform that she mentioned, we've talked about this. It's probably my favorite, I guess you could say, smart advisor, like rule-based advisor for investing money. Maybe competitors in the space would be things like Robinhood or Wealthfront, or what's another one? Betterment. I think these are all the ones that are in this space. They just make it very easy to invest your money into, in M1's case, pretty much any ETF. Any ETF is accessible on there. And in terms of your actual allocation, to your point, Brad, there's at least two factors that are the primary drivers for coming up with what your number is. And in my mind, it is how soon do you need this money and what is your risk tolerance, the balance between those two. And so, the other thing that you could look at is like what's going on behind the scenes, like your current net worth, your flexibility, your job security, do you have an emergency fund in place? Kind of like your general, like what are the other things that define your financial picture? Because if your emergency fund is in place, if your timeline is long, if your risk tolerance is relatively high. And what I mean by that is, go back to March. How scared were you in March of 2020? That is a massive indicator of what your risk tolerance actually was. If you were losing sleep when we saw a 30% drop, which we did over a period of a month or two, then you do not want to do things with your money that will make you lose sleep at night, right? I have long been pretty much 100% allocated towards equities, 100% allocated towards just, like VTSAX, go all in. In March of last year, I realized, despite knowing all the other situations, despite knowing my net worth, despite having a pretty solid emergency fund, despite being able to earn income several different ways, I didn't like the feeling of knowing that I didn't have any dry powder when the market was going down in March of last year. And so I learned something about myself, and I sat down with my wife and we kind of analyzed our emergency fund, because it's going to happen again. We're going to have another scenario. We don't know when, but at some point in time, you're going to have another scenario. Maybe it's not as bad. Maybe it's worse. And you're going to have to deal again with those 30% drops, 40% drops, something like that. If that were to happen and you were to have, let's say you were to just have $1 million and you were to watch that over a period of a month, 2 months, or a year go to $600,000, how are you going to be confident in your plan? Or are you going to freak out and pull everything out at the market down at the bottom, which is what many, many people have done. And so you need to find a allocation that allows you to sleep at night, be confident in your plan, and most importantly, and this is it, do not sell at the bottom. And it's hard to know. I mean, usually you don't know what the bottom is until it's on the way back up, but you got to stay the course. That's the guiding light on this thing. And your allocation should reflect your ability to stay the course.
Yeah. And I think first, as just a little side note disclaimer, obviously, Jonathan, this is, we don't know anyone's situation. We're not giving particular financial advice. Of course, this is for entertainment, but, this is how we would think through it in our own lives. And I think that's what we try to do here. I think everybody who listens to the show understands that, but you always have to do the research. You have to figure out, there's so many things in each individual person's situation in life that are going to, really make a difference in how they make a decision. But I guess, my kind of last thought on this is just get invested. That's really, like, don't get hung up on where is the perfect place. I think what we espouse here at Choosify is low cost, broad index funds, total stock market index funds, S&P 500, keep your expenses low. That's something that you can control, and it makes a massive difference over an investing lifetime. So don't get too hung up. Certainly M1 Finance is great. Vanguard is great. Fidelity, Schwab, there are all these places that you can invest for really $0 in account fees, setup fees, et cetera. So that's kind of how the advice I give to people is don't get hung up on that. I think any of the ones that I mentioned, I personally have investments at all of those places. So they are places that I feel comfortable keeping my money.
Now, Brad, I think for people that are finding this, like, what are the levers that we have access to be able to reach, financial independence? Because there's so many people that are just literally trying to make it to the next pay period so they can afford they can make the minimum payment on the credit card, that the idea of getting to the point where working is actually optional just seems like it's a foreign concept.
Yeah, I think I think it's largely because there's just no education when it comes to personal finance. We have all heard these things in the media, right? Like, maybe someday I can retire. Maybe if I'm lucky when I'm 70, right? Like maybe. And it always seems like it's up to somebody else. It's up to some other forces. It's up to society. It's up to luck. And I think the real beautiful part about FI and about our community is that we have taken this and made it about our ability to impact change on the world and on our own lives and on our communities, right? Like, that is just a really empowering mindset. And I think people see that when they take small actions day after day, that they can actually make their lives better. And it becomes this just amazing positive feedback loop that when you see something happen that's good, you look for other places. How can I make this one little change? Where else can I optimize? What else can I do that's going to save me money and my life will not get any worse, right? Like, that's the real secret of all of this, is that you make these changes and you think, oh, this is going to be horrible, right? Like, this is how you come in beforehand. Like, it's going to be deprivation. I'm going to be miserable. I'm going to miss all of those things I used to spend money on. And the real secret is you don't miss any of them. I feel like I live this life of abundance like this amazing life of abundance. And yet I save a huge percentage of my income. You know, when I was working, Jonathan, I saved 50 to 75% of my income living the same middle or even upper middle class life as everybody else. And I mean, that is just, it's an amazing thing, but it's so foreign if you haven't heard of this concept before.
Do you think there's like an income that you need to make here in the United States in order to be able to reach financial independence, Brad? Like, I mean, just like, is this, like for you guys, were you guys making six figures, multiple six figures? Do you think that everybody that's making financial independence is all, six figure people? Like, is there some sort of floor threshold at which point this really isn't for you?
I mean, I don't think there's a threshold where this message would not be valuable. I think that's how I look at it, is that no matter who you are, where you're coming from, no matter what mistakes you've made in the past, no matter what debt you're coming in with, when you find this message, you can take action to make your life better. And again, like I don't mean to sound like a broken record here or kind of evade your question. I genuinely am not evading your question. I think this message is applicable to anybody. Now, am I stupid or naive enough to think that this is going to be as easy for someone making minimum wage as it is for someone making $300,000 a year? No, obviously not. There is no question about that. But can anybody make their life better if they're living paycheck to paycheck and they can find that first $1,000 to save up and put in their bank account? I mean, I think that person's life is going to be dramatically altered for the better. Are they at financial independence? No, they're obviously not. But the amount of stress that is reduced that first time, and again, no matter where you're coming from, when you're not living paycheck to paycheck and you can save that first $1,000 or $2,000, your life is so much better. I mean, Jonathan, you're not at financial independence, right? Like you're on the path to FI, and your life is dramatically better than it was 4 or 5 years ago when I met you.
That's a good point. I would like to come back to that and discuss, kind of that idea of FI even along the way, because my life is really FI. I live a very FI life, and my bank account doesn't really need to have any number in it to feel good about that. But yeah, I think there is something to be said for having your cake and eating it too. But going back to that initial bit, like, is there a threshold? What I've always hated about that, that idea is that it assumes that wherever you are is wherever you will be. Like you have no control over both sides of the equation. The equation, well, it's the equation of life. No one ever told you about that? The secret equation? You didn't know about that? We can change all this, right? I mean, it is empowering to realize that there's rules to this game. And if you understand the rules, it makes it a lot easier to win. I mean, that's anybody that's ever played a board game will tell you is really hard to win if you don't know the rules, unless you're in an episode of Friends and Chandler's trying to hand you some money. That's it. What you earn minus, this is not algebra. What you earn minus what you spend, all right, is equal to some difference. So if there is no difference, or if it's negative, that's not good. It's suboptimal. For many people, it's zero, right? Ideally, there is some amount of a gap there, some difference. And the goal is, how can we expand the gap to give us more options? Which is why the FI community doesn't put all their emphasis on, but I'm not saying none, doesn't put all their emphasis on just go and make a ton of money, because there's a ton of people that make a ton of money that are paycheck to paycheck. And they've just forgotten that this equation is important, and what you're actually trying to do is grow the gap. For many reasons, it's usually more effective to start with the expenses, just because it's I think we thought of like 5 advantages that we could circle back to. It's worth it to start with the expenses and see what you can trim there, but it's not your only option. And we used to talk about this kind of like as a, intellectual exercise. Well, of course you could create the income, but I remember back in the day, the idea of increasing your income was always like, there were 2 options. Oh, you can go back to school, get another degree. And everybody knows, like, that the stereotype of where that ends up. It's another 2 to 3 years. It's another tens of thousands, $20,000 commitment plus. It's multiple years to then get on this new track to make up for maybe how the first one didn't land the right way. And the second option was the Dave Ramsey go deliver pizzas, have a yard sale. And while either of those might be okay for like a one or a two, like that might work for a 1 week, 2 week, 1 month sprint, it feels like there has to be a more optimized way for people that are intentionally looking for ways to massively increase their income in a relatively short period of time with ROI and timeline in mind. And I didn't want to keep going.
And leave the nice pregnant pause there. I like it. No, but I mean, that's something that, again, we've talked about on recent episodes about if I could turn back time, right? Like, what would I like to have known if this was 4 or 5, 10 years ago? And for me, negotiating salary is one of those blind spots that I think about an instance where like I took the job ultimately that I wound up with when I was there for 12 years to the end of my career. And I just failed miserably when it came to, hey, what are you looking to earn? What did you make at your prior job? Like, I had nothing. I mean, I was just a fool in essence. And if I had been listening to this podcast, so we had Tori Dunlap on episode 147, and we had Jessica, the financial mechanic, on episode 211. Yeah, 211. So you can find those by going to, obviously, on your podcast player, or just choosefi.com/147 or /211. And they gave us these really amazing, really almost scripts of how to get a win-win situation and earn more money. And for me, Jonathan, like I said, that was a complete blind spot, a complete failure that I don't think I even conceptualized it as a failure at that time because, I wound up getting a raise over my prior job, but I was then locked in on that salary, really that salary path forever. Because once you're in a big corporation, in most cases, you're just going to get the normal 1, 2, 3, 4% if you're lucky, like cost of living adjustment or whatever they call it, just a little bit of inflation. So I was locked in because I didn't want to leave that company. That's where you normally get those big jumps. But I mean, they gave us this set of tools that taught us how to negotiate. And I thought that was a real blind spot. And it was a limiting belief on my part, frankly.
Yeah. Salary negotiation is massive. I mean, you got to recognize what industry you're in, but it is absolutely, there are people in every industry that are doing this, and there are those that aren't. And the ones that are probably over their working lifetime going to make about $1 million more just because they kind of have this skill. And when you start stacking up, 3 to 8% annual raises versus their counterparts that are getting 1 to 2 because they just are following the rules, that compounds, that compounds massively. So just having a few of those strategies and talking about turn back time for me on the income side of things, I remember my search in 1999 was something like, top 10 paying professions. And I legitimately kind of just picked one on the list. And my point there is, yeah, I know it sounds so dumb. I wish I could say it wasn't true.
You've told us this story so many times. And sometimes I wonder, was it true? You actually did that.
Right? I looked for confirmation outside the list to see if this was the right, but yeah, I just went for it. So I was going to pharmacy. By the time that I was in the role of pharmacy, it was not roses, like 13 years later. And actually, that's kind of my point. Ask a better question, get a better answer, and know where to look is kind of part 2 of that. So I just repeated that search now. And the search this time was top 10 highest paying professions in 2021. And I ended up here are the ones I heard: senior corporate counsel, $175,000; psychiatrist, $218,000; hospitalist, $220,000; general physician, pathologist, medical director, surgeon. And it's, there's a pattern here. That's a great question. So your question was, how do I make 6 figures or multiple 6 figures? Or what jobs pay? That was your original question. What are the highest paying professions? And you landed on a bunch of, medical doctors in various niches. And, then what should come to mind right away though is, all right, if you were to pick off that list like I just did, eyes wide open here, to become even a primary care physician minimum, you're looking at 7 years plus undergrad, which would take you to 10. Most doctors, from the time they graduate high school, it's a 13, 14 year path till they're making those massive paydays. And when you add what they borrowed in student loan debt and the compounding interest, they have close to $500,000 dedicated to getting that. I mean, you better do it for the passion, for the joy of it. If you were trying to get a high paying career, the ROI is not the same. And it is a long, long stint to get there. When I think about that question now through the lens of somebody that's saying I make a minimum wage or $15 an hour and I'm trying to massively improve myself, and I don't know if there's like negotiation is something that I can seriously lever at this point in time. If I get 3% on $15 an hour, great. I'm up to maybe, high end $16. I need to move out of my industry, but I don't have the skills to do that. And that's kind of points to the stuck part, right? We are living in an amazing time where it is no longer the degree. It is the certificate program. It's the proof of skills that can unlock for you literally in a period of months, can unlock for you jobs that are paying $60,000 to $80,000 a year, all the way up to $100,000. I have proven that out. We've seen that now in our community. And it was really, I just want to highlight, it was because this community exists and this conversation was fostered. Tell us what you're doing. We know that if we have a community of people that are optimizing everything, they figured something out that Brad and I don't know yet. What is it that you are doing? Always extending the invitation and then vetting that information for, is this replicable? Are you an outlier? And it turns out that with what we're describing, and we can save that for another time, unless you guys are really interested, we'll actually point you to an episode that we just did on this so you can find out more, but that's not really the point. The point is to say, if you're making $15 an hour, but you were able to figure out how to use this stereo app, and when we drop the first call, go over to the second call, you can handle that level of competency on your phone or on your computer. That already tells me you're the type of person that could land one of these certificate programs and you could be making $60,000 to $80,000 a year in as little as 6 months from now, right? And so the people that want to tell you that this isn't for you, that you couldn't possibly do this, are the ones that are saying your current status in life is a fixed picture. You have no agency. Nothing you can do really matters, to which they say BS, total BS. And you found the community of people that genuinely care. They're putting this information together because they've won from it and they want others to know about it, and it works, but it only works if you take action. So we've talked about salary negotiation. For many of you, we know people that hurt, and that's the challenge to our community. Are you taking action? These are great ideas, but they work, but only if you take action. People in our community listen to those episodes, took the strategies to their employer. Within a week of that episode, we had like 3 or 4 people messaging us, telling us they had negotiated between them combined $60,000 to $70,000 a year in increases in pay in aggregate. This is money that before they heard that, and before they took action, was just sitting there, not being asked for. It makes a difference.
Yeah, I totally agree. And yeah, I guess that's kind of how we conceptualize this episode is what's stopping you from reaching FI, right? Like, what are those limiting beliefs? And I think for a lot of people, they hear this concept and, they have questions, right? Like, and it might be something technical. Like, we actually had this email come in a little ways ago from Matthew. And, he said, "I'm so glad I came across this podcast. I love the clear and objective message and the actionable advice each episode. I've been listening for the past 6 months or so. I also took the FI 101 course and enjoyed it." And then he said, "I have this question that has been puzzling me regarding financial independence. How do you retire early if you cannot touch retirement accounts until you reach age 59 and a half? Are people taking distributions and paying income taxes and penalties, or investing in taxable accounts and making distributions from those instead? Real estate income, dividends." And then he says, next, is it possible to achieve FI only by having retirement accounts, basically? So, Jonathan, that is just a series of incredible questions. And it's around this larger issue of, okay, I hear what you're saying. I really do. But there's still just this huge glaring hole for me of like, how am I going to access this money if you're telling me to load up on my 401ks and IRAs that I theoretically can't touch until I'm 59 and a half?
Yeah, this is a great question, and hopefully we'll give you at least the beginning of a great answer on this one. And it's like threefold. There's 3 different ways to look at this. The first one and the most obvious one is that early retirement, or getting to financial independence early, almost by definition, well, it does. It absolutely encompasses regular retirement. So you're going to need money now and you're going to need money later. And since we know we're going to need money later, let's go ahead and fill up all the buckets where we can make sure the money starts working for us, as much as possible. So the way taxes work is you earn the money, the government gets their percentage, and then you get the remainder unless you take advantage of buckets or, advantage vehicles that will allow you to get around that. And so we always try to max out our 401ks, especially as we start getting in these higher marginal tax brackets. Brad's an accountant, so I'll let him come back to that definition as the terms. But as the government starts taking a higher percentage, we have more of an incentive to hide that or shelter that from taxes. And then as you layer onto this, there are in fact strategies, and I'll give this back to Brad specifically, there are in fact strategies if you wanted to. And if you can create enough space, going back to that gap, if you can create enough space between your income and your expenses, there are strategies to be able to get access to that money in a way where it goes in tax-free, it grows tax-free. And with this strategy, which I'll give back to Brad, you can actually draw it out tax-free ahead of that traditional retirement age. It's just a triple whammy. It's beautiful.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jonathan. I did want to mention, I love the terminology of putting money into a 401k is hiding for taxes. I heard that in my CPA's brain was like, oh no, that's not exactly what we're looking to get across here. But no, jokes aside, like clearly putting money into your retirement accounts and getting the tax deduction, as Jonathan said, is an extraordinarily powerful tool. I think that's why we really highly advocate trying to max out your 401k and traditional IRAs, 403bs, 457s if you're a public employee, because what that does is it gives you certainty when it comes to your taxation, right? It gives you the tax deduction in this current year. And you know, at this point, more likely than not, you're earning more money now than you will in some retirement age, whether that's early retirement or a traditional retirement, when you will be making very, very little. And therefore, as Jonathan said, your marginal tax bracket, which is what the next dollar of income is taxed at. So basically, we have these tax brackets, and as you earn more money, it's always that next dollar. It's that marginal dollar. This is how you need to think about it. So when people say, oh, I'm in the 32% tax bracket, that doesn't mean every single one of your dollars is taxed at 32%. That's just not the way the US taxation works. It's not the way the tax code works. So what happens is you can Google just really simply federal tax brackets 2021, and you'll see for single or married filing joint or whatever it is, the first X number of dollars, let's say the first $10,000 is taxed at 10%. And then the next X number of dollars is taxed at 12%. And it keeps going like that. So that's how you need to conceptualize the taxation system. It's really, really important that you understand that. So basically what happens is when you put money into a retirement account that gives you a current tax deduction, like again, those accounts that I mentioned before, 401k being the most common, your taxable income is lowered right off the top at that highest bracket by whatever amount you put into that account. So that's a really, really powerful way to lower your taxable income now. So anyway, that's a very, very long preamble, Jonathan, to your question, which is, what is this strategy that you mentioned, which is really, it's kind of like ultimately the holy grail of what we're doing in the FI community. This is like the best case scenario if you could map this out. So it's called the Roth.
And Brett, I'm going to
IRA.
actually, I'll let you say it. Sorry, I'll let you say it aloud, but I would say the IRS did hide this strategy inside of 8,100 pages of the IRS tax code. They definitely buried it, but it is 100% legal. It is all there.
Yeah, no question about it. This is just, it's such a niche strategy that really is almost only going to be applicable to people in our community, but there's nothing secret here. These are just following the rules. It's just according to what we're doing, right? Like we are living this kind of countercultural life of saving money, right? Like that shouldn't be too countercultural, but yet it is. And that puts us into advantageous positions when it comes to certain things. And this is the perfect case in point. So it's called the Roth IRA conversion ladder. And Jonathan, we've talked about this on a couple of episodes going way, way, way back, right into like the teens on our 400 plus episodes ago. But in essence, this is answering Matthew's question of how do you access this money early? So basically what you're able to do is, let's say you have a vast majority of your net worth in your 401k. Okay. So you are, let's say, it doesn't ultimately matter. You're 40 years old and you've reached financial independence. according to, your research and the 4% rule of thumb and, whatever metric you use to decide that you've reached FI. So now you have most of your net worth in this 401k, but you do have some money saved up, certainly, in your taxable accounts, your regular checking, savings, brokerage accounts at wherever you have it. These are not under any of these umbrellas, right? So that makes sense, right? As just like a starting point.
Yeah.
All right. So at that point, you basically say, all right, I am not going to be working anymore. I'm not going to be earning an income. So that's kind of in our little example here. We're going to say, all right, you're earning $0. You've retired early. Okay. So your taxable income, let's say you did this on January 1st of 2021. So your taxable income for 2021 would be $0. Now, what you're able to do is you're able to convert. It's actually called a conversion. Again, the Roth IRA conversion ladder. You're able to pull some money out of your 401k and convert it to a Roth IRA. Okay. Now, a Roth IRA has a different type of character than a 401k. So a 401k, you get the tax deduction up front. And then when you pull the money out, you have to pay taxes on it. It's a taxable event. But now you are forcing this taxable event in the current year and putting the money into the Roth, because a Roth is an after-tax account. So that's money you've been taxed on, and then it grows tax-free and you can pull it out tax-free down the road. That's the beauty of a Roth.
And to pause on that, just for emphasis here, it's what you just described is you're incurring a taxable event. You're saying government tax me, but the year that you're doing it in is a low income year for you. And so remember how we discussed those marginal tax brackets, you're falling inside those parameters. And so the government is taxing you, but it's at the lowest marginal tax rate. Brad, am I on point up to here?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. So, we're in this kind of hypothetical example, we're saying that you have $0 of income in 2021. You are saying, I want to create this Roth IRA conversion ladder. So let's just say hypothetically, your expenses are $40,000 a year. So, basically you need $40,000 to cover your entire year's worth of expenses. So what you're able to do is you are able to pull out $40,000 from your 401k in a conversion to your Roth IRA. Now, that entire $40,000 is a taxable event. But again, you're starting at a $0 of federal taxable income. So now your taxable income is just $40,000. Now, what's interesting is, let's say you are married filing joint and you get a standard deduction somewhere in the vicinity of $25,000. So that comes right off the top. And your taxable income now is only $15,000 because you had that $40,000, that's taxable income. You get the deduction for $25,000 and your taxable income is only $15,000. And now that's applied against the lowest tax rate. So your tax rate is only 10% on that. So actually you're only paying $1,500 in federal tax on pulling that $40,000 out and putting it into a Roth IRA. Now that Roth IRA can grow again, tax-free, Jonathan. And now this is kind of where we're setting up this ladder. So you're going to do that every single year. You're going to make that $40,000 conversion. And the reason why you have to do it in this way is that you actually can't access that money that's converted for 5 years. So we'll talk about how you get through those first 5 years. But in essence, what you're doing is on January 1st, 2021, you're setting up this first year of ladder that you can access 5 years down the road. And then a year from now, you're doing another conversion that you can access, 6 years from now, et cetera. So you're doing that over and over again. And what you're doing is you're ultimately pulling out all of your money from your 401k and paying a tiny, tiny, tiny little tax rate on it. Like I said, you're paying about $1,500 in tax on $40,000, which is just a little bit more than 3%, right? So imagine being able to pull all of your money out of your 401k at a 3% effective tax rate. That is a remarkable, remarkable thing, and probably the single biggest potential hack in the FI community.
Yeah, and I think it's just nice to know, like, if that's what gets you to, because so many people use the excuse of, well, I don't want to have my money tied up till I'm 59 and a half. And I just think if you just know that this is there, that's what gets you to start doing it. It's already won, right? You've already kind of won. Because along the way, we're going to tackle this 8 ways from Sunday. I mean, you're not going to just focus on this. You're going to focus on increasing your income, and you're going to focus on, once I've maxed out my 401ks, how can I start investing in other vehicles? It's just nice to know that that money is not trapped there, and you don't have to be worried about a penalty, if you try to access it early. There's other rules that you'll start to become aware of that move that timeline down. We say the penalty is 59 and a half. In reality, there's something called the rule of 55. We've already taken 4 years off. I know a lot of people that are planning on doing work until they're 55. And in that case, if all of your money is with your current employer's 401k or whatever money is in your employer's 401k, you can take advantage of something called the rule of 55. It's in the IRS tax code, and you can access all of that money that's in your employer's 401k without penalty ahead of the 59 and a half under the rule of 55. Again, without that 10% penalty. It's just yet another option that is there. And it's important to have the mindset that we don't know what our life circumstance is going to be and exactly when we're going to need it, but we are going to need it. And, if you wait 20 years to get started because you wanted to have a little bit more of a sense for when your retirement number, what it is and where you could have already been done. If you start now, even if you have debt, if you put your mind to this, you could be on easily a 20-year path to financial independence. If you wait 20 years to get serious about this, then the clock's starting then. Why wait? Just start.
Yeah, agreed. And Jonathan, I just wanted to mention for the audience, if anybody's interested in learning more about that IRA conversion ladder, the Roth IRA conversion ladder, just head to choosefi.com/ladder. And there's a whole article here that walks you through step by step. Obviously, we did not go through every single aspect of this, but yeah, this is a really, really cool thing.
Hey, this is Andrew from the ChooseFI team. Hope you're enjoying the show. We're going to get right back to it after these quick messages.
All right, Jonathan, I think I'm going to brave trying to play a voicemail here. We'll see. Hopefully I don't screw up the whole...
I think you'll be fine. Let me close one more loop for people because I also mentioned earlier we were talking about if you wanted to increase your income and find out about a certificate program. There are a lot of certificate programs out there. In fact, Google just mentioned that they are creating a whole portfolio of these certificate programs. And so you could just search for Google certificates. We actually did pilot a program, and we have a free 5-day challenge for people that are interested in exploring that. For more information, you can find out all about this opportunity that's out there in Salesforce. It's incredible. We talked about it this past week, episode 297 with Anita, landed a 6-figure job in a new industry within about a period of 4 to 6 months, coming from a hospitality industry to effectively the tech industry, but it's not coding. You could be that person. I mean, these are replicable results. The 6 figures was pretty amazing, but I mean, typically 60 to 80,000 is what we see for a lot of people. So go to choosefi.com/297 to find out more about her story and what she did. And then for more information on that Salesforce opportunity, just go to choosefi.com/Salesforce. Brad, go ahead. Back to you, man.
I apologize in advance if I screw this up, but we're going to hear from our buddy Josh Overmeyer. So give me a second here. Let's see. Oh, come on. Ed, I don't have an order. All right, hold on. We're going to try again.
Hey, Jonathan and Brad, what are some other podcasts do you follow? Or what are the other influencers do you follow?
Oh, this is a great question, Brad. So I don't know if you have an order of operations, Brad. This is fine. So what podcast or influencers do you follow? So Brad, I know a decent number of podcasters, but you probably listen to more podcasts than any other podcast host that I know of. Who are the ones that inspire you the most?
Yeah, that is a good question. Yeah, I do. I listen to a crazy number of podcasts. Like, it's almost absurd, honestly. I think the ones that I like the most, I mean, my longtime favorite is the Tim Ferriss Show. I think, it's really as much for the guests as it is for Tim Ferriss himself, but he does a really wonderful job interviewing people, and he gets amazing guests on that are really world-class performers at their different aspects of life. So, I mean, that jumps out to me. That's my longtime favorite. I'm a huge fan of Dr. Peter Attia. He has a podcast called The Drive, and he's just absolutely brilliant. I'm always trying to find like these like next little health hacks just to kind of stay healthy as much as I humanly can. I'm trying to, obviously it's like the 80-20 analysis of how do I stay healthy. I actually found another podcast recently from Peter Attia called the Huberman Lab. And this is a neuroscientist at Stanford, this guy, Andrew Huberman, I think his name is. And it's I just found out some like cool little sleep hacks, which were neat. And I'm trying to kind of help my daughter get to sleep earlier. She's now 12 and going to sleep at midnight, which is always interesting. So yeah, we're trying to put some different kind of circadian rhythm thing. Anyway, long story short, that's not all that interesting. But yeah, those jump out to me. I guess I'm a big fan of Naval Ravikant. So there's a podcast called The Naval Show, or just Naval, I think it is, Naval. That is a fantastic little just set of short little philosophies, basically. He's a multi-time guest on the Tim Ferriss show. I'm just a huge fan of Naval. So yeah, I mean, Jonathan, without looking at my podcast app, because I'm afraid that I'm going to hang up the stereo, that's what jumps out to me. But I'll try to brainstorm. What do you listen? Do you listen to anything?
I do a lot of tutorials these days. I'm very, me, I just like adding to my skill stack. So I tend to look at more just trainings, online trainings, that sort of thing. So I spend a lot of time on Skillshare and YouTube, trying to up my skill stack. That's like my preferred method. My one, I guess, dream guest or person that I just love him is Scott Adams, and he has his YouTube thing called Morning Coffee with Scott that I've really enjoyed recently. And so that's just kind of one thinker, and he's kind of all over the place. He's not really latching down, but his idea of the talent stack still sits with me to this day. I think he was the original one to talk about that. You introduced me to that idea that, instead of being like world class at like any one thing, which is probably really hard, you could just be like better than average at a bunch of different things, and you could make something completely, you could make a skill set that's very high demand and very unique, and kind of carve out your place. And that's kind of, as someone that really identified with mediocrity, in so many ways, that was something I was like, all right, I could do that. I could be a little bit better than average, right? I'm not going to be Michael Phelps of anything, but I could be better than average at a bunch of different things. And yeah, I think it works. It's kind of allows you to start seeing opportunities and make connections that maybe other people are not making. And so I give him a lot of credit for that. And I hope to reach out to him at some point, maybe even in the near future, and have him come on the show and talk about his life journey. I mean, I think the book that inspired the idea of the talent stack was, and I'm going to missay the title, and I apologize ahead of time, but it was basically how to fail at nearly everything and still succeed. Am I close, Brad?
And still win big. Yep.
Still win big. Got it. And yeah, that's actually, I fail all the time. And I remember when the fear of failure would keep me from starting something or trying something. And now, truly, mindset, I understand and respect the fact that this is a process, and failure is completely fine. And I try to use some rules around it. I try to fail in inexpensive ways. I try to fail in ways that don't demoralize me. And I try to look at those failures and figure out what could I have done better and iterate on that and be excited to get back at it. And that tiny little tweak and that shift of, it's kind of that Thomas Edison. Oh, you're such a failure. No, I know all these things that don't work. It's you kind of realize there's more truth there than, it kind of felt like a platitude when you were a kid. Nobody likes to fail. And now you're like, no, it's like a truth for life.
Yeah, I think there's something definitely to that, right? Like if you're not failing, you're just kind of staying in your lane, right? Like, are you really trying hard enough? Are you trying hard enough to learn new things, right? Like almost invariably when you learn something new, you're going to fail, right? Like that first time is going to be pretty darn difficult, but it's how you pick back up and move forward from there. And Jonathan, I think you were answering one of our future questions that I think is going to come through here, since I don't get to select them, unfortunately, but about who would our dream podcast guest be. So I think we're going to play that one here shortly. But
yeah, we'll just have to see what's in the Russian roulette of the voicemail machine, right?
We'll answer that when we come to it. But actually, two other podcasts jumped up for me. So Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard, I think is one of, if not the best podcast that exists. I think it is incredible. He is, the actor, Dax Shepard from Parenthood, super smart guy, really interesting. He's, very emotionally open. He's a brilliant interviewer. that's my new favorite show. And I'm a big fan of the Prof G show, Professor Scott Galloway from NYU. I just like the guy. So I enjoy listening to that. But yeah, that's in my very large stable of podcasts. So, all right, we're going to move on here.
On them. This is the thing. Like, he actually stays up to date on all of these shows. Like, there's no backlog. I don't know how you, I don't know. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's kind of
pathology at this point, but okay, we're gonna move on here. Let's see if I can kick up the next voicemail.
I think one of the most impactful lessons I've learned from listening to your podcast for the past 4 years came from Jerry, the millionaire educator, back in season 1, with his concept of earning your income and keeping as much as you can on your side of the ledger rather than Uncle Sam's. Sure, it's great to go out and find ways to keep increasing your income and changing jobs, and all of this helps expand your income earning potential. But if you always spend every dollar you make, you'll never be able to retire. You'll never reach financial independence. So there's that inherent need to focus on savings and not spending every dollar that you can that really supercharges your path to FI.
All right. That was our buddy Josh Overmeyer, who's a great friend of the FI community. He's, to a large degree, Josh is the FI community. He's amazing. He's always at all the meetups, Jonathan. He's just a remarkable guy.
Yeah, and to his point, it's one that stood out with me. I mean, really very early on. I remember, Brad, when we were talking about who was our dream guest to get on a show, when we started, like, what was one of the first names I said, we have to get Millionaire Educator on the show? He was episode 13. We'd only interviewed, so you can go to choosefi.com/013. I think we'd only interviewed maybe one other person before talking to him. I was so excited to speak with him that I think it took 20 minutes for you to get a single question in. At the end of it, we were like, that was a good interview. But I was like, I wasn't in it, but I mean, yeah. It's,
Oh, that was so funny. Yeah, way back. I think our first 3 interviews, I spoke for under 1 minute. That was... I was
so nervous about silence. Like, I was so nervous that we wouldn't have the next, talk about failing and failing forward, Brad. I mean, we picked up podcasting in 2017 and you're like, there's this terrifying mic that you're looking into and you don't know what the next sentence is going to be. And you're like, so just fill the space. There just can't be silence.
But yeah, Josh is spot on with, keeping it on your side of the ledger, just that mentality, right? I think I know you have cited that dozens of times over the last 4 years as something that just really stuck out to you. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting because the Millionaire Educator, I think, was either our second or third guest, but I get emails every single week at our feedback@choosefi.com email address talking about that episode and how, I'm a teacher and I heard that Millionaire Educator episode and now I get a paycheck that's $2.47 because I'm maxing out my 403B and my 457. And we saved $96,000 this year between myself and my spouse. I legitimately get those emails on a weekly basis. So that is unquestionably one of the most impactful episodes.
I'm trying to remember now what exactly he was living off of, because I know it was a badge of honor to them every single year to go into the HR department and have them come back and say, are you sure about that? Are you going to be okay? And the key is, they were able to, I believe it was either they were living off of, he had done some sort of like SEP or 72T distribution, or he had money in his taxable accounts, Brad, that he was living off of. It was one of those two. But the key was, when you were in the higher marginal tax brackets at 25, 22, 24% beyond, he was making sure all of that would go into, in his case, he actually had access to 2 things. A lot of people don't realize this, and a lot of teachers, state employees have access to this. His 401k, so him and his wife, both teachers, he had access to his 401k. Let's just say it was $18,000 at the time. I know it's gone up since then, $19,000, $19,500, but let's just say it was $18,000 at the time. And his wife, $18,000, putting him at $36,000. And then he had access to another, not as well-known tool called the 403B. It was the 403B. And this is another account that is available for public employees, so state employees, but not limited to teachers. So a lot of firefighters, police officers, state employees have access to this. And it gives you another some odd 18,000, 19,000. I think it matches the 401k limits that you can
19,500.
19,500. Okay, now. So another, again, just matching it back at the time we were talking with him, 18,000, right? So 18,000 with him and another 18,000 for his wife. They were putting at the time somewhere around $72,000+ a year because it was their side of the ledger. They were putting these in these pre-tax accounts. I mean, they just built a monster machine, and they weren't making, they were making, I think they had basically looked and they had found out the rules inside of their teacher district where they could get additional certifications and get a guaranteed raise, teach a sport or something like that, or do an extra, session or period or whatever, and be able to put on another 10%. They basically looked at all the rules and they maximized their income, and then they made sure they kept as much of it as possible. And there was one year where he was saying, we're on 2 teacher salaries with the public school system. And we're not talking about the college level or any high paid level. It's like what most people would think of as a $40,000 to $50,000 a year job. And we, between the two of us, are saving over $100,000 a year because we just looked at the rules and we optimized. See how much better silence is now.
Yeah, you don't feel it. I like it. I'm very impressed. No, it's a remarkable thing. And I think something you said in there is just knowing the rules. Right. I mean, I think that's one of the through lines of what we've picked up at the FI community is we all are trying to learn the rules of the game. And when you understand them, then you can look at it and say, okay, how can I make this work for me? And this might be unusual, right? Like I might be the only person in the history of my school district that has gotten a $2.47 paycheck. And the HR department might look at me like I'm crazy. But you know what? I just lowered my federal tax to 0 and I saved $90,000 amongst the two of us. And we're going to retire at 45 just by knowing the rules, by knowing that that's an option. Like Millionaire Educator in this case saved tens of thousands of dollars in tax basically every single year. And that's just a cool thing. And I mean, that is but one example of just knowing the rules. It just sets you up for success. So yeah, I think that's a really, really critical lesson and something we should, reiterate, Jonathan, pretty often about, and we talk about that. Like, okay, do you understand the rules? Do you understand where you are and how to move forward from here? All right, we're going to move along from there. I'm going to click it again and we'll play a little roulette here, see what comes up, Jonathan, okay?
This might be a little off topic, but I was wondering if you guys had any dream guests for the podcast and who that would be.
All right. So we've had about 5 minutes to think about it. And so I guess obviously I'll say I would like to reach out to Scott Adams and invite him on the show, and it just needs to happen. So I'm going to put that together and try and get him on the show this year in 2021. I'll do the best I can.
Yeah, I think that should be very doable. Mine would actually be Mark Cuban. So I just heard him recently. I was doing some research, and he was on a podcast called The Quest in this past week or so. And I was stunned by the language that he used, which was almost identical to FI language. Like that's how he conceptualized saving money before he sold broadcast.com for billions. He thought about, how do I earn enough so I have passive income that covers all my expenses? It was really cool to see him talk about that. And, I'm just fascinated by his entrepreneurial spirit. I think he's got some cool things going. Jonathan, obviously I'm not a dyed-in-the-wool cryptocurrency fan by any means. I think that's the understatement of the century. But there is a lot of just fascinating new technology coming around with these things called NFTs. It's these non-fungible tokens. It's like basically digital art or digital videos that you can own. You have actual ownership. And his contention is this is how Gen Z and beyond, how they're going to collect things. And it's just so, and this is not the exact instance for this, but it's just fascinating to see new technologies come up and see someone like him who, frankly, he doesn't need to learn this stuff. He's worth billions upon billions of dollars. And yet he is at the forefront, the cutting edge of trying to figure out what is going to work. And I find that mindset so empowering. And I'd like to believe that I'm someone who's always looking to learn. Like I'm never resting on my laurels or getting stuck in some silly belief that has been with me for years. Like if I'm ever at the point where I'm just stuck in some belief and I'm not willing to open my mind, like I feel like I've failed at life. And I think he is the perfect example of that open-minded really entrepreneurial spirit. So yeah, Heath, long story short, Mark Cuban, unquestionably.
All right, there it is. We'll have to keep thinking about that list. I think one thing that what stands out to me is, who does our audience want us to have on this particular show? To me, someone from the audience telling us these are the people that I think would add a lot of value to the FI community, as opposed to maybe a booking agent or someone else that's proactively just trying to get their person on everywhere. I really do want to know, who would you like to bump into the FI community and hear, some ideas looked at through the lens of someone that's on the path to financial independence? And, you're not going to agree on everything. And I know we've tried this before, and sometimes it's an intense conversation. But I mean, Paula tried it, with Susie Orman a while back. And it was I think the community was better for hearing that clash of ideas. I'm just thinking who these individuals are and the ideas that are out there. There's a lot to choose from, but I think the FI community is better when we recognize that we don't all agree on the same thing. But to Brad's point about being open-minded, there shouldn't be anything that you're afraid to touch or go near. It should be, how does this look through a balanced lens of what my goal is, which is to, reclaim my time and my bandwidth and be able to allocate that and be able to, create a safe, financial future for myself and my family. So send us your ideas and who you'd like for us to reach out to, and we can look into seeing whether or not that would be possible. All right, Brad, what do you got for us? All right, I don't know. It's roulette, so we're gonna hit the button here. See next what comes up. Let's play the next one.
Say you're on the fast track to FI. Say that's within 15 years, and you want to start thinking about adding bonds to your portfolio. So say currently you're about halfway through and you're still 100% equities. When do you think is a good time to start adding bonds to your portfolio? I'm especially talking about the people that are pretty fast to FI, the people that are trying to get there within 10 to 15 years. And a little context, I am a young adult. So kind of what are your thoughts on when to start adding bonds to your portfolio? Would you say about once you're 75% of the way there? Is there a number that you should get to? Just what are your thoughts?
Man, this is a great question. And it's not one that I have a prescriptive answer for at this particular point in time. I will just say that I plan on being at financial independence easily within 15 years and likely inside of 10. I'll be at FI within 10 years very handily. And at what point would because right now I do not have anything in any bonds at all right now. I have zero bonds. I am trying to diversify my portfolio. And so I have, a lot in, index funds as we talk about. And, there's some pivots there between whether it's cap weighted or whether it's, kind of being a little bit more diversified and having some in small cap and value. You've heard the conversations that we've had with Paul Merriman. But largely it's, we're looking at an equity-based portfolio with no bonds. So at what point do you start getting more conservative? And I think for me, it's probably more in terms of once I have a clear exit date in mind, I guess, if I knew that I'm going to be needing to do drawdown inside a period of 5 years, personally, it's a personal answer. I'm just kind of sharing what my personal mentality is. I'm starting to think about what's going to derail that. And would a big event, going into that last year or right after, would that scare me or terrify me? And then at that point, I'm saying, do I need as much growth for this last 5 years, or do I need to have some sort of ballast in place, something to smooth the ride? So for me, it's kind of more of what's my plan post-retirement? Am I going to be earning income on the other side, or is it just a transition to something else? And how far out till I'm planning on walking away from whatever that current form of income is? It's a combination of those two. And then as to the actual percentage, 60-40 is that old traditional standard advice of 60% bonds and 60% stocks and 40% bonds. It's a very personal choice. I think J.L. Collins says it the best. It's what allows you to sleep at night and just basically your risk tolerance. We could have that episode linked up as well. For me, I probably will not be quite that conservative, but what I might do is something along the lines of 20 or 25%, bonds or some sort of safer, less volatile vehicle. And then I might, taking a look at what Frank has talked about, I'm going to start really looking at what is the point of these? Am I looking for stability? Am I looking for income? Am I looking for negative correlation? And I will probably start doing some research around that. So it might look like, some sort of speculative investments for a small piece, maybe something in precious metals or in crypto or something like that for a small percentage. But that's kind of just like a general thought process. And again, the big points that I wanted to do here is I usually would say, for me personally, if I know I'm going to be within about 5 years of my expected time of needing the money, that's when I plan on starting to be more conservative with my investments and starting to make some adjustments, basically planning out a glide path to my exit date. Brad, I know yours looks a little different, but you're farther on the path, so maybe you could have a different opinion from mine.
Yeah, I will definitely go into that. Do you recollect that Big Earn talked about paying off a mortgage as a potential alternative to bonds?
That is a great point. Yeah, well said. Let me find the episode while you kind of talk about your strategy, and then I'll give you that number.
Cool. Because I think that's really important information that could definitely help. So, because mine is just going to be kind of an anecdotal answer, which is, obviously this is a great question. I personally am not stepping off of the equities gas pedal, let's say, even though I'm at financial independence. I personally do not have any allocation in bonds whatsoever. So for me, I don't know, there's not some prescribed amount. There's not these are the rules, or like you said, the traditional amount is 60-40. I think, people, it's going to be individual preference, and it's going to depend on your timeline. I know you said you are a quote unquote young adult. So, that suggests to me that you're, maybe in your 20s is what I'm kind of guessing. And you're talking about a fast track of 10 to 15 years. You have a really long time horizon. So I'm not sure that I would personally, and this again is not, exact advice for your situation, but I'm looking at what's the highest likelihood of maximizing my net worth and making sure that this lasts me throughout my life. And I think for me, equities is personally where I would choose. So I'm not sure that I would put any significant amount in bonds. That said, Jonathan, to your point, there are other options. That doesn't mean I'm not looking for, if I had something that could guarantee, and I use that very loosely because it's not possible in 99% of cases. But if there was all of a sudden a bank that paid a guaranteed interest rate of 5% or something, which amazingly enough was the actual case when I graduated college, which dates me quite a bit. But online banks paid 5% at that point. So, if we got into some crazy environment where that came back, that's not too shabby, right? To guarantee that, especially when, I need a 4% safe withdrawal rate and I'm guaranteeing myself 5%. If I could absolutely lock in a 30-year guaranteed 5%, yeah, I might consider that for some percentage of my net worth. But again, I'm just kind of setting up a funny example of how I would approach this mentally, because I think that's really the answer. Is we're not going to be able to give you an answer for every single situation you face, but how do you think about the problem? So, that's roughly how I would think about it.
Well, you dropped a lot in there. I think it's really important to actually structure that a little bit in terms of what are the variables to consider. And I think it's probably worth pointing out, a few things came to mind. So one, first and foremost, Big Earn. I think it's going to be episode 152R was another good one we had with Big Earn. ChooseFi.com/152R. And then let me give you guys a couple more. I think these are the two. It's ChooseFi.com/066, the emergency fund. Is it a bad idea? I think he talked about the glide path at the end. And then ChooseFi.com/035, sequence of return risk for early retirees. Those are both the two big ones. All right. Now, going back to this, the thing that Brad just said, creating your glide path. If you can decrease massively your structural expenses at the point of retirement, what I would say that would mean is you could treat that in some part like having bonds. That's a case that Big Earn was making. That would act as a substitute for having a hefty amount of bonds, because the actual structural costs of your life are so much less, because you don't have a $1,500 mortgage, a $2,000 mortgage, a $3,000 mortgage, because that's gone. That is a structural expense that's gone. And now the bonds that you would need to make sure you always had to cover that may not need to be there. Bonds are not very attractive right now, right? They just haven't been super attractive for several years. And so I think all of us are kind of what else could I do? And people look at it different ways. Some people just, end up having a big cash cushion, So like, hey, I may not have any bonds, but I have 2 years in cash. So if it hits the fan, I'm good for the next couple of years regardless. Is that the most efficient way of doing it? Maybe not. Big Earn would say absolutely not. It's a huge cash drag. Other people like Brad, like to Brad's point. So one, on the other end of financial independence, you created multiple kind of relatively, until Choosify at least, it was relatively passive income businesses that didn't take. So that's another thing that a lot of people are doing, and they have income on the other side. Really what reaching financial independence meant is they stopped working for a corporate, right? They were just done with corporate work. They were just doing their own thing. Maybe it's something that they wanted to pick up, and that starving artist syndrome really kept them from pursuing it. Now they're creating for the love of creating, and they earn income on the other side. Or if that massively changes your risk tolerance, and what sort of allocation you need if you're going to be earning even any sort of income on the other side. And a couple other things that you could add onto this just to balance it out is, how much flexibility do you have in there? So Big Earn likes to kind of say, well, you're going to need to be more flexible than you think. But I think it's worth pointing out that someone that's pursuing financial independence aggressively, thinking they're going to hit it in 15 years on this side, on the left side of 40, they have a lot more runway than someone that's just eking out financial independence at the age of 67 while accounting for Social Security. They're just barely hit their number. And as long as nothing breaks, it's going to be fine. They don't have as much flexibility in that plan as the individual that, they could work. They could earn more. They could go back if they needed to. And I know that there used to be the old, you can't get jobs during a pandemic, or what type of job are you going to get? Well, that's been proven because we had a perfect case study this past year. We had individuals that lost jobs making 35, retrained. We just talked about at the beginning of this episode, and the job's paying 60 to 80, right? That is a perfect case study for the fact that, like, if you have good information and you can act on it, you can get a job that pays more than it pays right now in the worst of worst times. And so your degree to be willing to be flexible if something were to come at you, and you're willing to accept that is a possibility, is that work? Because the counterpoint comes with the cost too. You being too heavily weighted toward bonds may mean that you're working 1 year, 2 year, 5 years longer than you need to work. It's not like just going to bonds locks in the date that you want. You could have been there multiple years sooner. How much is that security of knowing? How much of your life is it worth to have that? That's kind of like the value judgment that you have to play. And Brad, to your point, like, I know you like your cash a little bit more than I do. And on my end, I did say bonds as this theoretical thing that I'm going to have to grapple with as I get closer. But I can tell you right now, I don't look at bonds and say, "Woo, I wish I had more of those." It's just, you got to make a decision based on the variables at your disposal at a particular point in time, knowing kind of what you want on the other side.
Yeah, agreed. It's just like anything. It's personal finance is truly personal, and you need to figure out where you're coming from. I know that sounds kind of cliche, but it really is true. Like we always say here, there are things that may be more mathematically optimal, but if you don't sleep well at night, is that really the right decision for you? And for me, I very strongly factor in that, do I sleep well at night test. It matters for me. So
one more. I will say though, you said it, and I realized before I walk away and I go into drawdown, I have decided I am going to pay off my mortgage. Like, I know that 100% before I'm actually technically drawing down $1. Before I'm in that place, I want that structural expense gone. Many people are happy riding it out through drawdown, but for me personally, I'm not going to pay it off early now. I'm going to let my equities roll. But when I get close to that retirement date, I'm going to get rid of that mortgage and get that structural expense off of my books. And that massively changes the calculation on what your FI number is and needs to be on the other side.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a massive, massive expense every single month. So yeah, it's huge. And actually Big Earn, so on earlyretirementnow.com, he has the famous Safe Withdrawal Rates series, and part 21 is why we will not have a mortgage in early retirement. So I think that answers the question. And Jonathan, that also goes with your thought of, hey, it's just not going to be part of my FI plan. So yeah, that's thank you for the questions. And Jonathan, I think we're gonna wrap this up for now.
All right, everybody. So we worked through a few road bumps this week, and we appreciate your patience. Those of you that hung on with us, we hope you got value from it. We are planning on doing this for the next 10 weeks. We'll be coming to you live, so you guys don't need to tune in this Friday, right? You can just skip that episode because we're going to be airing this for the larger Choosify community. But if you'd like to interact with us, you'd like to hear us put it together live with all of our train wrecks and car crashes, we would love for you to consider joining us as it works for your schedule, and just send us your voicemails, and we'll keep getting better at this, keep dialing it up, keep being more fun. All right, Brad. Well, we survived. It was our first kind of live radio show-esque event. I keep waiting for someone to say first-time caller, long-time listener, and Josh kind of gave us a little bit of that. So hopefully we'll be able to continue to dial up the interaction and the engagement on these events. But because I think if the conversation is limited by our questions, we're going to have blind spots, and the heart of this was always, what is the community grappling with? What is the nuance that they want to get some input or insight on? And while it's really hard to give personalized advice, you can certainly take the framework of what they're giving you and kind of expand on it. How would you look at the variables, and what direction would you move in with those variables in mind? So with that in mind, we hope that you will join us next week and let us know what's stopping you from reaching financial independence, or just, what is a question that you've had that you haven't been able to get a great answer on and you want to bring it to us. We might not know the answer, but then that provides us great insight as to what information we really need to bring to this community, and we can track down experts and do that. So take us up on the invitation, go to choosify.com/live, tell a friend. The fire is spreading, my friends. We'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.
If this episode was helpful to you, don't forget to subscribe. If you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your friends about us. We can be found on Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere you listen to podcasts. While you're there, don't forget to check out our other shows like Everyday Courage with Julian Johnsrud and Rebel Entrepreneur with Alan Downigan. If you would like a free bite-sized course to jumpstart your financial independence, check out choosify.com/challenge. Choosify is produced by Andrew Mendonsa and Zachary Tan and is a production of Choosify Media Incorporated. Choosify.com is managed by Annie Sheely with William McVeigh, MK Williams, Melissa Lagerquist, Liz Kessler, Stephen Hettig, Kelly Black, and Jennifer Ma. And Ed T is our CEO. Thanks for listening.